Hello students, welcome to this session of the nervous system. Learning objectives of the nervous system. So in part 1 we will have basics of the nervous system, that is neuron, meninges, ventricles and something about the CSF, that is cerebrospinal fluid. Then in part 2 we will see in detail brain, spinal cord and the peripheral nervous system. And then in part 3 we will see how the nerve impulse is generated, conducted and transmitted and the reflex action, and then some parts about the applied neurology.
So nervous tissue is a specialized tissue which transmits the stimuli. So in characteristics, neuron is a structural and functional unit of the nervous system. The cytoplasm present in the nerve cells is called as neuroplasm and the covering is called as neuralema. Now neurons have lost permanently the power of division because they do not have centriole, so they do not divide, and the function of the neuron is transmission of nerve impulses.
Now let's study neuron in detail. So the structure, it has 4 parts: dendron, cyton, axon and synaptic knob. So the dendron, it is short and it carry nerve impulse towards the cyton. Cyton, it is a cell body which contains nucleus, neuroplasm, that is cytoplasm, then cells granules. So they are ribonucleic acid which is required for the protein synthesis, and neurofibrils and mitochondria. The axon, it is long fiber which carry nerve impulse away from the cyton, and the cytoplasm is called as exoplasm and the membrane is called as exolema. And the sometimes these neuron have fatty covering, so it is called as myelin sheath, and it is interrupted in between, so that is called as node of Ranvier, which contains the cells. They are called as Schwann cells, and the branches of axon, they are called as telodendria. The long axon is also called as nerve fiber. Then types of neuron according to the myelin sheath. So myelin sheath present, they are called as myelinated or medullary nerve fiber, and example, they are seen in central nervous system. Myelin sheath absent, so they are called as non-myelinated or non-medullary nerve fiber, and they are mostly seen in autonomous nervous system. And the fourth part is synapse. So it is a junction between two neurons, and the distal end of the axon is called as synaptic knob, which contains synaptic vesicles and which secrete chemicals. They are called as neurotransmitters. Types of neurons are many. So first is depending on the structural types. So they are 3: unipolar, bipolar and multipolar. So unipolar neuron, it is having single process, and that is dividing into the dendron and axon, and it is mostly seen in embryonic stage. Bipolar neuron, it has 2 processes, one dendron and one axon, and it is mostly seen in retina of the eye. Multipolar neuron, it has several dendrons and one axon, and mostly seen in cerebral cortex and motor neuron of the spinal cord. The second type can be functional types, so it is sensory, motor and mixed. So sensory neuron, it carries impulse from sense organ to central nervous system, and they are also called as afferent neuron. Motor neurons, so they carry nerve impulse from CNS to effector organ and also called as efferent neuron, and sometimes both may be there, sensory and motor, and it is called as mixed neuron. So the third type is depending on the myelin sheath, so maybe myelinated nerve fiber or non-myelinated or non-medullary nerve fiber. So myelinated nerve fiber mostly seen in cranial and spinal nerves, and non-myelinated nerve fiber mostly seen in autonomous and somatic nervous system. The fourth type is afferent fiber and efferent fiber and mixed fiber. And the fifth type is depending on the origin of the nerves. So from the brain, they are called as cranial nerves, and from the spinal cord, they are called as spinal nerves. The second component of the nervous tissue is neuroglia, and they are supporting cells to neurons. So there are total 6 types. So 4 are seen in central nervous system and 2 are seen in peripheral nervous system. So out of 4 in central nervous system, first is astrocytes, which support and provide glucose. The second is microglia, which causes phagocytosis of the microorganisms. Third is the ependymal cells, so they are columnar ciliated cells, and it is mainly required for the circulation of the cerebrospinal fluid. Fourth is the oligodendrocytes, and the function of the oligodendrocytes, they form myelin sheath in the axon. Peripheral nervous system, so there are two types. So fifth is nervous system definition: the system which contains vast network of specialized cells called as neurons to carry information in form of nerve impulse to and from all parts of body in order to bring about body activity is called as nervous system. And the functions are to receive stimulus, transmission of stimulus, interpretation and analysis of stimulus, and response to stimulus.
So this is basic structure of the or parts of the nervous system. So nervous system is mainly divided into three parts, that is central nervous system, peripheral nervous system and autonomic nervous system. The central nervous system is mainly of two parts, that is brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system, this is the main contains is nerves which arises from the brain and spinal cord. So cranial nerves and spinal nerves. An autonomous system is composed of sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. The cranial nerves are of three types: sensory nerves, so they are 1, 2 and 8 in number. Motor nerves, they are 3, 4, 6, 11 and 12. And mixed nerves 5, 7, 9 and 10. So total 12 pairs of nerves are present in cranial nerves, which arises from the brain.
So in this diagram you can see central nervous system, which consists of brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system, which consists of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. So peripheral nervous system, depending on the functions, it has two parts, that is sensory and motor. So sensory, also called as afferent nerve fiber, so which carry stimulus from sensory receptors to central nervous system. And motor is also called as efferent nerve fiber, so which carry impulse from central nervous system to effector organ. And the sensory nerve fiber, it is two types, that is somatic sensory fiber and visceral sensory fiber. So somatic sensory fiber, which are associated with the skeletal muscles, and visceral sensory fibers, which are associated with the visceral organs. Peripheral nervous system can be divided into three types depending on type of effectors. So first is somatic neural system, also called as voluntary system. So it carry impulse from central nervous system to skeletal muscles. Then second is autonomic neural system or involuntary system. So it carries stimulus from central nervous system to involuntary organs and smooth muscles. Then it is of two types, autonomic sensory neurons and autonomic motor neurons. And then autonomic motor neurons are of two types, sympathetic and parasympathetic neurons. And the third type is visceral nervous system, in which stimulus is carried from central nervous system to the viscera, that is visceral organs. The differences between somatic and autonomic nervous system. So somatic is voluntary muscular movements, and in autonomic there are the involuntary muscular movements. In somatic it involves skeletal muscles, autonomic involves smooth and cardiac muscles. In somatic system, the neurotransmitters released is mainly acetylcholine, and in autonomic it is norepinephrine or acetylcholine. The examples of the somatic nervous system, so they are cranial and spinal nerves, and in autonomic it is sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves.
Now we will see coverings of the brain. They are also called as meninges. So brain and spinal cord are surrounded by three connective tissue membranes, and they are called as meninges. So cranial meninges, they are covering brain, and spinal meninges, they are covering spinal cord. The outermost covering of the meninges is called as dura mater. It is tough membrane. The middle layer is called as arachnoid matter, and the innermost layer, which is vascular and it is attached to the brain, is called as pia mater. Then the space between dura mater and arachnoid matter is called as subdural space, which contains the blood mainly. And arachnoid matter and pia matter, which contains the space, is called as subarachnoid space. Sub means below. So subarachnoid space between arachnoid matter and pia matter. So it mainly contains the cerebrospinal fluid. And the pia matter and arachnoid matter also called as leptomeninges.
Now we will see ventricles of the brain. So cavities or spaces present in brain are called as ventricles, and because of that the brain weight becomes lighter. So there are mainly 4 ventricles in the brain. So first and second ventricle, they are also called as lateral ventricles. They are cavities of the cerebral hemisphere. Then third ventricle, it is present in diencephalon, and it is the first and second open into the third ventricle through opening called as foramen of Monro. And the fourth ventricle, it is seen in hindbrain, and the third ventricle opens into the fourth ventricle by a narrow passage called as aqueduct of Sylvius. And these ventricles contain the fluid that is called as cerebrospinal fluid, and in coming slides we will see in detail the cerebrospinal fluid collection and examination.
Now let's study cerebrospinal fluid. So it is a clear fluid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. So this CSF is produced by specialized cells, that is ependymal cells present in the choroid plexus of the ventricles of the brain, and about 125 ml of CSF at 1 minute is produced, and about 500 ml is generated every day. The function of cerebrospinal fluid is to protect brain and spinal cord from the injury. Also it provides nutrients in form of glucose to the brain and spinal cord, and the waste they are generated, they are removed through the cerebrospinal fluid. So these are main functions of the CSF. So location of CSF, it occupies the subarachnoid space, that is the space between arachnoid matter and pia mater, and the ventricular system around the brain and spinal cord. So it fills ventricles, cisterns and sulci. Sulci means these are the depressions, as well as the central canal of the spinal cord. There is also connection from subarachnoid space to the bony labyrinth of the inner ear via perilymphatic duct, where the perilymph is continuous with the cerebrospinal fluid. And the significance of this is when there is leakage from inner ear, it may produce CSF rhinorrhea, means the CSF is throwing through the nose. It is called as CSF rhinorrhea. So this is a clinical significance of the CSF. Now the composition, so it is mainly derived from the blood plasma, but proteins are less in this. So CSF proteins mainly 15 to 40 milligram percent, glucose is 40 to 80 milligram percent. Normally RBCs are not seen in CSF, and WBCs they are 0 to 5 per cubic millimeter. Thank you. Now what is importance of CSF collection? When we need the CSF collection, because CSF collection is not a routine procedure like we do for blood collection. So it is not easy method for the doctor and also for the patient. It is painful procedure. So the indications or where CSF is required in the meningitis. So it is the inflammation of the meninges, that is coverings of the brain. So the meningitis can be caused by virus, bacteria, tuberculosis bacteria or fungus. So to know the whether in meningitis is there or not there and which type, CSF collection is required. Then in brain hemorrhage like subarachnoid hemorrhage, in brain injury or brain tumor, CSF collection is required to know the exact pathology. Thank you. So collection of CSF is done by LP method, that is lumbar puncture method, and it is also called as spinal tap. So here lumbar puncture needle is there. So physician will first clean the part selected, that is the space between L3 and L4 lumbar vertebra. L3 means third lumbar and L4 means fourth lumbar vertebra, the space between two vertebrae. So with cleaning with spirit swab, betadine spirit swab, the needle is inserted into the intervertebral space, that is space between two vertebra, L3 and L4 preferably, and then it will go into the skin, then bone, and then the cavity, that is CSF filled space in the central canal of the spinal cord, and then with help of syringe the CSF is collected, and then it is collected in a bulb for the examination.
Hello students, welcome to this session of the nervous system. Now we will see part 2, that is in detail the central nervous system and other systems. So first is central nervous system. So it consists of brain, and the brain consists of forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So forebrain is also called as prosencephalon. It has olfactory lobe, cerebrum, diencephalon, which consists of thalamus, hypothalamus and pituitary gland. The midbrain, also called as mesencephalon, it consists of visual reflex center and auditory reflex center. Hindbrain, also called as rhombencephalon, it consists of cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. So first part is forebrain. In that first part is olfactory lobe. So these are two lobes present in anterior side of the cerebrum, and the function of olfactory lobe is the sensation of the smell. The second part of the brain is cerebrum. So it is the largest area of brain, and it is divided by longitudinal fissure, that is corpus callosum, into two cerebral hemispheres. So hemi means half. So right and left hemispheres. So each hemisphere consists of four parts. So first frontal lobe, second parietal lobe, third occipital lobe and fourth temporal lobe. The outer surface of cerebrum is called as cerebral cortex, and it contains grey matter which consists of nerve cells, that is neurons, and the inner surface is called as cerebral medulla. It contains white matter, that is nerve fibers. The structure of cerebrum shows folds called as convolutions. The convolutions are made up of gyri and sulci. So gyri means upper part and sulci means deeper portion. And the gyri and sulci, they help in increasing the surface area of the brain. Functions of cerebrum. So it performs function of mental functions like memory, planning, intelligence, understanding, thinking, judgment, and many sensory, motor and visceral functions. So frontal lobe, it has areas for intelligence and memory. It has motor areas for leg, arm, trunk, neck, face and tongue. Parietal lobe, center of sensation of touch, pain, temperature and speech. Temporal lobe, center for hearing, taste and smell. Occipital lobe, center of vision. So if occipital lobe injury is there, then patient may get diplopia, that is double vision. Diencephalon, it has three parts: thalamus, hypothalamus and epithalamus. So thalamus, it is a large part present above midbrain and functions all sensory impulses except smell pass through cerebrum via thalamus. It is associated with pain and emotion, and it is also associated with alert mechanism. Hypothalamus, that is below thalamus, and it is under two cerebral hemispheres and immediately below thalamus. It forms the floor of the brain. Functions: hypothalamus controls activities of the pituitary gland by secreting releasing hormones and inhibitory hormones. So it controls the pituitary gland and then all other glands. The hypothalamus, along with the limbic system, controls emotional and behavioral patterns. They regulate the expression of pleasure, anger, fear. Hypothalamus also regulates circadian rhythm and maintains consciousness and homeostasis. The hypothalamus possesses a feeding and thirst center. It controls the food intake by satiating the feeling. Epithalamus, it is the smallest and most dorsal region of the diencephalon. It lies posterior to the thalamus. It consists of pineal gland which secretes hormone melanin which induces sleep signals. Thus epithalamus along with hypothalamus regulates sleep-wake signals. Brainstem, it is the part of the brain located between diencephalon and spinal cord. So it consists of midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata. The functions: it is situated between cerebrum and spinal cord. So brainstem coordinates functions between brain and the rest of the body by communicating information. It is responsible for controlling important body functions like blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, swallowing, consciousness. Second portion is midbrain, also called as mesencephalon. So the small stalk-like structure which connects pons and cerebellum with cerebral hemisphere is midbrain. The cerebral aqueduct, that is canal, passes through midbrain, and four swellings at dorsal portion called as corpora quadrigemina. The functions of midbrain: it controls vision, it controls hearing, that is auditory function, so it maintains balance of the body, and it is connecting link between forebrain and hindbrain. Hindbrain, which consists of first part cerebellum, so it is present just below cerebrum. It is second largest part of brain after cerebrum. The cerebellum consists of middle vermis, which connects two lateral hemispheres called as cerebellar hemispheres. It is made up of outer grey matter and inner white matter. The surface is grooved, but convolutions are less prominent than cerebrum. The function of cerebellum: it coordinates muscular movements during walking and running. It plays important role in maintain posture and balance of body. It maintains muscle tone. So if any injury caused to the cerebellum, there is loss of body balance and loss of posture. The second part of the hindbrain is medulla, also called as myencephalon or medulla oblongata. It is lowermost portion of the brainstem. It is extension within skull of the upper end of spinal cord. That means medulla continues with the spinal cord. Coverings: it contains outside white matter and inner grey matter, opposite to the cerebrum. Functions: it controls involuntary actions like heartbeat, circulation, respiration, peristalsis. It controls act of swallowing, vomiting, sneezing, coughing, hiccups. It conducts to and fro impulses of motor and sensory nerves. It controls flow of gastric juice, which is important for digestion of food in stomach. The third part of the hindbrain is pons. It is also called as pons varolii, and it is strip of nervous tissue which lies below midbrain and above medulla. It consists of outer white matter, inner grey matter. Functions: it connects two lateral lobes of the cerebellum and midbrain to medulla. It provides space for motor fibers which run across cerebrum and cerebellum. It is concerned with regulation of heat in body, and it is center of reflexes. Limbic system: it is also called as paleo-mammalian cortex, and it is a set of brain structures located on both sides of the thalamus. It is located surrounding corpus callosum, and upper part of the brainstem is the present limbic system. Functions: it is also called as emotional brain. It plays a vital role in the expression of many feelings like pleasure, anger, fear. Amygdala, a pair of almond-shaped set of neurons located medially deep inside the temporal lobe, and it functionally is a part of the limbic system. Functions: it play a key role in processing of memory, emotional responses, decision making, and it is associated with the emotional responses related to fear, anxiety and aggression. If damage to both amygdala in person may result in loss of certain kind of fear, for example fear for snake, fear for wild animal or fear for gun, so it causes loss of fear. Hippocampus is the another important constituent of the limbic system. There are two hippocampus on either side of the brain in vertebrate and in humans, and it is functioning like new memories associated with learning and emotion. Damage to one or both hippocampus by disease like Alzheimer's disease or accident may result in loss of memory and inability to form long-term memory. The second part of the central nervous system is spinal cord. So it extends from medulla or brainstem up to the second lumbar vertebra, that is L2, and it is about 40 centimeter in length. It passes through foramen of magnum at the base of the skull. It has a hollow oval shaped container that is tapering slightly as it descends, and the terminal fibrous extension is called as filum terminal. It is surrounded by a protected meninges and vertebral column. The cauda equina is pia mater continues up to the coccyx, and it is called as a cauda equina, that is like a horse tail. The transverse section of spinal cord, so centrally it consists of central canal which is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid. The H gray matter is surrounded by the white matter. The posterior or dorsal root and anterior or ventral horn consist of the dorsal and ventral roots of the spinal nerve, and then it is from the mixed nerve. Dorsal ventral fissure at the dorsal side and coverings, that is meninges, that is dura mater, arachnoid mater and pia mater. The functions of the spinal cord: it plays an important role in the conduction of impulses to and fro from the brain to outlying parts. The spinal cord acts as a major center for many reflex actions of the body, and it also serves a connecting link between brain and the spinal nerves. Applied, poliomyelitis virus destroys anterior horn motor neurons, and then symptoms early are fever, headache, muscle pain, weakness, and then later paralysis occur, and patient may die due to paralysis of the respiratory tract. Hello students, welcome to this session of the nervous system. Peripheral nervous system. According to the origin, peripheral nerves are divided into cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The cranial nerves originating and ending from and into brain, and spinal nerves originating and ending from and into spinal cord. Cranial nerves, there are 12 pairs, that is 24 cranial nerves in number. First, olfactory, function is smell. Second, optic, function is vision. Third, oculomotor, eye movement. Fourth, trochlear, eye movement. Fifth, trigeminal, sensory and jaw movement. 6, abducens, eye movement. 7, facial, taste sensation, jaw movement. 8, auditory, hearing and balance. 9, glossopharyngeal, tongue muscle movement and sensory. 10, vagus, sensory to chest and abdomen organs, visceral organs, that is heart, lungs. 11, spinal accessory, movement of shoulder muscle. 12, hypoglossal, movement of the tongue. The second part of the peripheral nervous system are the spinal nerves. So these nerves arise from spinal cord and are called spinal nerves. The type is mixed nerve. They are formed by sensory portion, that is from the dorsal root, and it is afferent, and motor portion from the ventral root, it is efferent nerve. Total 31 pairs of spinal nerves are in man. First, cervical, they are 8 in number, present in neck region. Second, thoracic spinal nerves, 12 in number, present in chest region. Third, lumbar spinal nerves, 5 in number, present in back region. Fourth, sacral spinal nerves, 5 in number, lower back region. Fifth, coccygeal spinal nerve, so they are 1 in number and they are found in the pelvic region, are called as coccygeal spinal nerve, found in region of the coccyx. So total C8, T12, L5, S5, CO1, total 31 pairs of the spinal nerves. ANS, that is autonomous nervous system. It controls the involuntary function of the body, and types are sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So autonomous nervous system is a division of nervous system that supplies internal organs, smooth muscles and glands. The autonomic nervous system is a control system that acts largely unconsciously and regulates body functions like heart rate, force of contraction, digestion, respiration, pupillary response, urination, and certain reflex actions such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, vomiting, hiccups. So this system is the primary mechanism in control of the fight and flight response. Sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system try to balance each other in the body. So sympathetic nervous system is operative during emergency, parasympathetic during the normal activity. Sympathetic is regulated by the neurotransmitter epinephrine and parasympathetic by the acetylcholine. The sympathetic system functions as the increasing heartbeat, then extra blood to muscle tissue, then helps in widening of the pupils of the eyes so as to make maximum use of the available light. So it is mainly concerned with the fight and flight mechanism. Parasympathetic is decreasing heart rate, then it diverts the blood flow from muscles to stomach and intestines and help in contracting of the pupils of the eyes. So it generally helps in rest and digest mechanism. This is a chart showing the actions of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system on different body parts or the systems. Part 3, that is synapse and reflex action. So first, synapse, it is junction between two neurons, and it is formed by membranes of presynaptic and postsynaptic neurons. The synaptic cleft is the gap between two neurons, and the synaptic knob is the bulb-like portion of the end of the axon. The synaptic vesicles, and it consists of the chemicals, that is neurotransmitters. So according to the neurotransmitters, the neurons are cholinergic neurons which secrete acetylcholine, and they are present in sympathetic, parasympathetic preganglionic neurons and sympathetic and parasympathetic postganglionic neurons. And the second type is adrenergic neurons which secrete noradrenaline or norepinephrine, and they are present in sympathetic postganglionic neurons. The receptors, so acetylcholine and norepinephrine, are stored in synaptic vesicles which are present in synaptic knob, and they are released at the axon ending by exocytosis. They diffuse through the synaptic cleft and are received by respective receptors. These receptors are membrane protein located on the plasma membrane, and depending on the type of neurotransmitters received by them are divided into two types. So they are cholinergic receptors or adrenergic receptors. Mechanism of chemical synapse. So impulse, that is action potential, it generated and then it travels from axon. So from synaptic vesicles the neurotransmitters are released, and they from the synaptic clefts they received by the receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane, and the new potential is generated. It can be excitatory or inhibitory. So nerve impulse, in that we will see generation and conduction. So nerve impulse are the series of electrical signals that is generated in neurons, that is nerve cells, in response to stimulus. And the action potential, it develops when the membrane potential of a specific cell location rises and falls. So neurons propagate communication in a neuron. The action potential is also called as nerve impulse. Now we will see mechanism of conduction. So in that three stages are there: resting, then resting, that is polarization, then depolarization and repolarization. So in resting state the axonal membrane is permeable to potassium and impermeable to sodium and proteins. So inside more potassium, low sodium, so outside low potassium and high sodium. So there is a concentration gradient formed at resting state where there 3 potassium are expelled and 2 sodium are taken in by potassium sodium pump. So more negative charge inside and then than the outside, and it causes polarization. Then the stimulus at point A, there is influx of sodium, so outer surface negative charge and inner surface positive charge. So the electrical potential difference at the site of stimulus is called action potential. Then the membrane resists entry of the sodium, and as sodium entry declines the potassium voltage gated channels open and efflux of potassium take place and decreases positive charge and increases internal negativity, restoring repolarization state. So at point B, outer surface positive charge, inner surface negative charge. So inner surface the current flows from A to B, and outer surface the current flows from B to A. So in this there is nerve impulse, generation and conduction. So total 3 stages: resting, polarization, depolarization and repolarization. So nerve impulse are of two types: electrical synapse and chemical synapse. So electrical synapse, the membranes of pre and post synapse are in close proximity, and in chemical synapse the membranes of pre and post synapse separated by a synaptic cleft which is filled with the fluid. The electric current flow directly from one neuron to other, and in chemical synapse the electric current flow through the synaptic cleft. The transmission of impulse in electrical synapse is simple and faster than the chemical, and transmission of impulse in chemical synapse is slower and than the chemical. The electrical synapse, it is rare. Now we will see reflex action and reflex arc. So reflex action is the entire process of response to a peripheral nervous stimulation that occurs involuntarily, that is without conscious effort or thought, and requires the involvement of a part of the central nervous system, is called reflex action. And reflex arc, when the reflex action is performed through a specific neural pathway, it is called reflex arc. And the components are total 5. So first is receptors, that is site of stimulus. Second, sensory neurons, so they transfer afferent impulses to central nervous system. Then integration center, so it consists of short interneurons which form synapses between sensory and motor neurons. Then fourth is a motor neuron, so it conducts different impulses from the integration center to effector organ. And effectors are muscle fibers or glands which respond to different impulses and undergo contraction or secretion respectively. Knee jerk reflex, so it is used to test neurological disturbances in the neuromuscular disorders. So procedure, so you have to strike patellar tendon by a hammer, and then there is sudden kicking movement of the lower leg. So now we will see mechanism. So in this procedure, afferent neuron receives signal from sensory organ, that is stretch receptors present over the knees, and then transmit the impulse via dorsal root to the central nervous system, that is spinal cord. The efferent neuron then carries signal from spinal cord to the effector, that is muscle, and then it contracts, and then because of that there is movement of the lower leg. So the stimulus and response forms a reflex arc in the knee jerk reflex. Applied neurology, so neurology is the study of nervous system. So in that, very common condition is the meningitis. It is inflammation of meninges, that is brain coverings. The types are bacterial like Neisseria, syphilis bacteria, pneumococcus bacteria, or viral, tubercular like Mycobacterium tuberculosis, fungal like Cryptococcus, very common in AIDS patient. So clinically patient is having high grade fever, headache, neck stiffness, neck rigidity, and the investigation for confirmation is cerebrospinal fluid examination. So CSF is taken by lumbar puncture. Other conditions like subdural hemorrhage, it is injury to brain by accident or high blood pressure. Symptoms: loss of consciousness, paralysis, loss of any physiological function, loss of memory. Investigations: MRI brain or cerebral spinal fluid examination. Brain tumor, it is glioma, and the symptoms of the pressure effects like headache, vomiting, convulsions, and MRI brain or CSF examination done. Alzheimer disease, it is genetic disorder seen in degeneration of neurons. It is because of the accumulation of proteins in the brain. And symptoms: memory lost, ability of judgment is lost, general physique of the patient is affected. Cerebral stroke, damage to part of brain from interruption of blood supply because of bleeding in brain, because of hypertension. So patient may have loss of balance, loss of memory, disturbed vision, paralysis, one side or both side of the body. So these are the applied neurology. Hope you find this session useful for your understanding and for your exams. Thank you.